Welcome to the Caregiver Relief Podcast, a space where we share real conversations, heartfelt stories, and hard-earned wisdom to support those on the caregiving and healing journey. I'm your host, Diane Carbo, RN. This episode is sponsored by myvitalvault.net, your all-in-one life organizer for aging adults and caregivers. It's designed to help you securely store your essential legal, medical, and emergency information in one easy-to-access place. Because when a crisis hits, being prepared can make all the difference. Join our Caregiver Relief community, a warm, welcoming space where you can connect with other caregivers, ask questions, share stories, and find support from people who truly understand. Visit community.caregiverrelief.com to join now. Because caregiving is one of the hardest and most meaningful things you'll ever do, and no one should have to do it alone. And if this episode speaks to you, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Every click helps us reach more caregivers who need encouragement, resources, and hope. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches all of us at some point, grief, and the unexpected ways it continues to show up in our lives. My guest today is G. Scott Graham, author, coach, and what he calls an existential handyman. Scott is someone who has walked the path of profound loss and dared to love again. His new book, Come As You Are, 5 years later, is a raw and honest reflection on falling in love after the death of his husband and how the new love stirred up grief in surprising, transformative ways. This isn't a conversation about getting over it. It's about living with it, loving through it, and recognizing that healing doesn't follow a script. Scott, I'm so excited and honored to have you here today. I'd like to start by saying thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to help me share your story with us today. Can you share a little bit about yourself and about your husband and what life was like before his passing?
Yeah, I have to tell you, it's really a privilege to be here. And this podcast really provides a great base for caregivers. At one point in my life, before Brian died, we became caregivers for my mom.
Oh, God bless you.
She lived in Florida and she was in her 90s. She fell and broke her hip. And that's like, in your 90s, that's like the nail in the coffin type.
It really is. People don't understand that, but it is.
And it was really funny. This is a piece that I just really so admired about Brian and why we had such a sustainable, monogamous, loving relationship for over 3 decades. But here my mom broke her hip, and most people would have been like, we're putting her in a home. We live in such a disposable society. We send our kids to boarding school. We take our dogs to the rescue shelters when we've had enough of them, and we ship our parents off to nursing homes. And this came up. It was like, what are we going to do? And I remember this conversation with Brian. I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, it's easy. We're moving to Florida and we're going to live with your mom. And we owned a restaurant. He had a career. He had everything up here. And I said, we can't do that. Or can we do that? He said, nothing is more important than caring for family and being there for family who have been there for you. She like wiped your ass for years. She put up with all of your bullshit while you were in grade school, had to go see the nuns who were like, you were just driving crazy, unwritten homework, carted your ass all over the place from music lessons, swimming lessons, the list goes on. This is nothing, he said, in comparison to what she has given you. Not even coming to a fraction of that. And it's the funny thing is that when you meet someone who is genuinely giving, the other person responds with compassion too. So when we told my mom we were moving to Florida, and that was that, it wasn't a ploy, it was not a ploy. And she said, no, you know what? I'm going to move up with you guys. We weren't doing it as a ploy to get, she had said she was never going to move back up north from Florida. No more snow. But she did that. When she saw our sacrifice,
Yeah.
she responded with a sacrifice on her own. And she lived here till she died. And we had hospice care come in, and it was just two guys helping a 90-year-old live with dignity and cleaning her up, taking her to the bathroom. We did that for 5 years. She lived with us. It was really
God
hard.
bless you. And you know what? There are so many rigid seniors out there that are selfish and self-centered, and they won't leave their home. But your mom had unconditional love. And I love that about her, because I could see me doing that, because my son lives in New Hampshire. And I'm like, I went up there for a year and my pain and body hurt, and I had to come back. But I would go up there again if I needed to be taken care of, only because I can't expect him to pick. He's got a ketamine clinic. He's very busy in his life, and I wouldn't take that away from him. So I get that. I really get that.
Yeah. And
So
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so what inspired you to write Come As You Are 5 years later now, 5 years after that profound loss?
Brian died in a horrific car accident in 2019, right before COVID hit, right
Mm.
around Christmas time. And in my isolation of trying to get my together with no support, because the world closed down. It was a horrible
Yes.
time. And
In some states it did. I lived in South Carolina and I was in New Hampshire, and they were open and we still functioned in the real world. Not so many states that were shut down. It was a terrible time.
yeah, yeah. And so there was really no support
Yeah.
around anything here. And so I really had to figure it out. So I wrote the first book, Come As You Are, Meditation and Grief, talking about how I got through that. And I've been a therapist for many years, like
Mm.
decades. Since 1988, I've been working as a therapist and counselor. That's a long time. And it's like being a driving instructor who never drove a car. That's the kind of therapist I was. And I think a lot of therapists with grief are out there. They are like uh, driving instructors who never had to drive a car. And so they're full of all of this book learned knowledge, which
Yeah.
actually isn't true, not true at all.
Yeah.
And they dispense that on to people. I can't tell you, Diane, how much regret I have for all the damage that I caused as a therapist over the decades until I myself got out of the passenger seat and into the
Yes.
driver's seat and
Yes.
realized that I was just dispensing to people and hurting people, really hurting people.
One of the things I say, and a lot of my listeners may find this offensive, but I always say academia ruined nursing, because they do all this book learning, but they're never taught how to practically apply their knowledge. But then again, they've also taken the best parts of nursing, educating the patient and spending time with them and teaching them. They've taken that away from the nurse, and given it actually into the hands of the aides. So I can relate to what you're saying about therapists. I really can, because they haven't lived it. I also can relate that to people that live in chronic pain, because our providers, our healthcare system, knows nothing about managing pain, and they treat everybody like they're criminals. So I really understand it, that unless you've been through it and experienced it, you may not be the best person to handle different diagnoses or situations. So I really respect where you're coming from there. That's real honesty.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the biggest myth out there, and listeners, you do not take my word for this. You Google this yourself. You will see the biggest myth that is out there is this piece of the stages of grief. People may have looked this up or have heard it. Most people have heard this up. In fact, a guy that I'm currently dating lost his job, and he said to me, it's really appalling to me. Not that he said this, but that this model has been hijacked so badly. He just lost his job, and he's like, I got to go through the stages of grief. There's denial and this about,
Yeah.
and poor Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with this model for people who were at the end of their life. End
Yes.
stage. That was it. How people who had a terminal illness were coming to grips with it. And it has been hijacked from for everything from addictions to losing your job to how to repot plants. It's ridiculous.
You know what? I have to tell you, 100% agree with you. And it makes me crazy because people think they have this process they're going to go through to acceptance. And they do not understand that what Kubler-Ross was doing was, it was people in the end of their lives. It doesn't pertain to everything. In fact, it was for cancer patients. So you're absolutely 100% correct that they've hijacked this and made this false sense of, oh, you can get through this and you're going to be fine when you get through it. And it's not that way at all. So I really relate, and I'm grateful for that because this is raw truth here today. It really,
Right. So people then go into therapy or they're dealing with something with this expectation that is totally fabricated.
yeah.
And then when they don't experience this fabricated reality, they end up feeling even worse because somehow not only are they grieving, but somehow they're not even doing the grieving part right. I
Yes.
want to let you know this. If you're listening to this, there is no right way to grieve. And if somebody tells you that, even me, if you read one of my books and you're like, oh, yeah, this is it, don't buy it. Don't buy it. It's just not true.
You know what? I will tell you, I lost my mom at 17. I lost my oldest son to suicide at when he was 35. He was a disabled vet with a terrible pain condition. And I recently lost my baby sister to suicide because she had the same pain condition my son had. And it always shocks me. With my mom, I still to this day, my mom went through cancer treatment. I was a young girl and she had lung cancer, never smoked a day in her life. Her family owned and ran a dry cleaning store and they lived above it. So all my aunts and uncles of this very huge Irish family have had some sort of cancer in their lives. So my mom died very young. In fact, what has prompted me to really understand the grief and death and dying processes, my mom, I went through the whole summer of my senior year going into before nursing school, taking my mom back and forth to cobalt treatments at the time. So it's Christmas time. She's going to take me home from nursing school, and she's got a doctor's appointment at the oncologist across the street from the school. She literally was told, Louise, you beat cancer. And she was so excited because she was so excited to have Christmas with us. And her and I were going to go shopping to pick up last minute items for the kids, my brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of four. On the elevator, on the way down to the lobby to come across the street to tell me the good news, she threw a pulmonary embolism and died that night in intensive care. And all through my life, I see people struggling to fight death and they go through all these terrible, awful treatments. And consistently, I've seen the damage that the cancer treatments have caused them. And so many have come across and said to me as a nurse, because I even worked at a cancer center for a while, that if they had known what they were going through, they wouldn't have done it. And I actually, in all honesty, I got fired from a world-renowned cancer center because I told a young woman who was not doing well that she should consider going on hospice. And in the cancer world, that's a no-no. You are not to discuss hospice because the truth of the matter is research money is more important. I get so much of what you're saying about the miscommunication and the misinformation about grief out there. You've said that grief can come back, not in sadness, but in hope, desire, and fear. Can you talk about how that reemerged through your experience of fall in love again? Because that is something that I think is very important for so many of my listeners. I'm 72. I have so many that are losing their spouses. And it's funny because the men seem to be able to move on. A lot of the women aren't. So I'd like to hear about how you do that, because I struggle, even though it wasn't a spouse I lost. I divorced my spouses, but I, not to make light of anything, but it breaks my heart when I see these women lose their husbands and they can't move on from it. So how did you do that?
There really is no moving on piece. You're not really moving on.
Yes.
It's you're integrating. And see, what happened for me, and this is the reason that I wrote this book 5 years later, is that although I was telling folks over the last 4 years, there is no moving on for grief, there was a part of me that thought I had moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sloppy around that piece. And then I fell in love again. And then what for me then created problems was this feeling of like imminent doom, because I knew the truth. I knew the truth. I had experienced the truth that all life ends and
Yes.
all things end.
Yes.
And when you love something, love someone, it could be a dog, it could be a kid, anything like that, the inevitable thing that's going to happen is pain.
Yes.
Pain always follows love. Unless you're an asshole and you don't care about people, that's the only way to avoid pain. But if you open your heart to other people, you're going to have pain. It's just part of the process. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just the way.
I agree. I agree.
And so I tried to avoid this. And then when I got in this relationship with Peter, there was this piece when I got in this relationship with Peter that I found myself grasping and trying to hold on, grasping and trying to not let go, as if I was trying to avoid the inevitable that I now knew was there.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece that totally caught me off guard. I was experiencing grief before it even happened. And Brene Brown calls it anticipatory grief.
Yes.
Had to work through that. And the way to work through any of these pieces, just worry. There's only 3 domains that we can live in life: the past, the present, and the future. It's really that simple. There's this piece that Brene Brown talks about called anticipatory grief.
Yes.
And that's where you're like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so that the simple reality, listeners, and for Diane, you know this, there's only 3 domains that we live in: past, present, and future. If we're in the past, we're full of regret and remorse. If we're thinking about the future or depression, or thinking about the future, it's anxiety and worry. And the way to antidote stuff is to stay in the present and appreciate what you have right here, right now. And that was the key to working through this anticipatory grief when I found myself projecting worry and anxiety that I was going to lose Peter, or that now I have love again and I'm going to experience pain and I don't want that. I had to remind myself that the truth of our life is that the deeper your love, the deeper your grief. Then there's no way around that. Why would we want around that? Otherwise, we'd be like numb zombies.
Yes.
That's the choice. And so I choose, not chose, I choose to love again and live again, because that's part of our human existence.
Yes. You know what? I suffer from anticipatory grief, and I didn't lose a spouse. I lost a mother and a son. And I keep myself, I know this sounds so strange, but I do keep myself from getting involved in another love relationship, because I don't know, I don't have more to give. I don't want to feel that pain. It was so profound both times. And I realize it, and I'm not willing to change at 72 years old, which is sad because my life might be more complete. But I have a lot to do with other people, and I support them and help them. And I have lots of friends, and I always feel loved and wanted. And that's really important to me. But having a love relationship, even without losing a husband to death, is still very challenging for me. It really is.
Because you've experienced the sting and you know the truth, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so what it takes is, once you know that stuff, is it takes courage to
yes.
put yourself out there. And especially as we age, I realized this with my mom. I was talking earlier about my mom living with us,
Yeah.
and I had this huge insight. We say we want to live to an old ripe age, but that's
Hmm.
not really that's only half the truth. The real truth is we want to live to an old, ripe age. And this is the important part. Everyone and everything we care about, we want to outlive us. My,
Yes,
that's the real truth.
yes.
My mom stopped making friends. And I asked her one day, I'm like, I don't understand why you're not making friends. She's in her 90s.
Uh-huh.
And she said, I can't make friends anymore because all the friends I make die.
Yes.
Every single one of the friends I make die, and I can't do that anymore. She lived, and part of me is, thank God she died before Brian died. And she would have been totally heartbroken had she outlived him, but
Yes.
she outlived her husband. She
Mhm.
outlived my sister, who was killed in a car accident. She
Oh,
outlived my brother, who died of cancer. She outlived all her best friend that she grew up with and hung out with. She
hmm.
outlived people that she knew at church that were friends of hers that died. They all died.
Yeah.
Everybody died.
Yeah. And it's devastating to the soul. I know I did okay after my mom died when I was 17. And here's my son, 35 years old, and with a severe pain condition, and he can't take it anymore. And he completes suicide. That pushed me over the edge. I've never gotten over it. And it's going to be 14 years in September. And I can't imagine your mother lost two children.
Yes.
You're not meant to live like that.
Yeah. You are not meant to get over that.
No,
And
and you
and
do. I love your wording because it evolved. Because I have family members that say to me, "Aren't you over that yet?" It puts, I'm shocked that the insensitivity of people that, it's something you can get over. It just doesn't. It was a piece of me. I love my animals, and I get sad and overwhelmed when they pass. A child is 100 times worse. So it's really challenging, and people don't understand that it doesn't go away. It's just, you're right, you evolve. So I want
right.
to ask you, how did your new relationship challenge or reshape your understanding of healing?
It's it's brought it up, and that relationship with Peter has ended, and I've moved on. I have a new relationship with a guy named Lou. Just great. And what it has shaped with is that this is just part of who I am. It's like the
Yeah.
fact that my car is red. It's not good or bad. And I've even had to, like Lou has said to me in recent conversations, oh, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to make you sad. And I'm like, you're not making me sad.
Yes.
You're just, there's no sadness around this. There's grief isn't sadness, as in, I'm not sitting pining and longing and wishing. You can
Yes.
do that.
Yes.
You can do that. And
Yeah.
that's not healthy. It's not, it is, and here's the example I throw out to folks. You don't want to fuel any emotion. And you
Yeah.
can fuel, for people who've not experienced grief, you can fuel anger. Think of the
Yeah.
person who cut you off while you were driving, tooted the horn, and gave you the finger. You can let that go at that minute. Or
Yeah.
there are some people who days later are sputtering about that. They're thinking about what a jerk that person was a whole week later. Sometimes people are months later, they're bitching and moaning about the person who gave them a finger while they were driving down the road a month ago.
Yep.
They
Yep.
just fuel that emotion.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy, no matter what emotion you have, anger, grief,
Exactly.
depression, or anything.
Yes.
The other example I throw out to folks is that you probably have seen a funny movie, a hysterical movie that you just love. And when you think of that some scene for that movie, or you're talking or telling somebody about that scene for the movie, you're probably going to laugh.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you're crazy. It
Yep.
doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that you're psychotic because you're laughing and nothing else is going around you except something in your head. It
Mhm.
means that you're human and you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable and open with your experience. That's all.
Exactly. One of the things that I experienced with both the death of my mom and the death of my son is people have a tendency to avoid you after the
Yes.
death for a very long time. And I was always shocked by that. And the other thing is, they avoid talking about the person you lost as if they no longer are important to you in any way. And I just think, I find that so hurtful and so insensitive. There's still times when I talk about my mom and I can cry, and it's 52 years later. Or my son, there are moments when a thought comes to me and I think, oh, I miss you. It's grief. And people, instead of acknowledging, oh, I may not understand how you feel, but I want to support you, let's just avoid the subject altogether.
They do that all the time, Diane. And so, listeners, I'm going to give you a tip. This was the kind of central thesis. I couldn't come up with names of the book. So I wrote Come As You Are, and then I wrote Come As You Are 3 years later, and then Come As You Are 5 years later, and probably 5 years from now, it's going to be Come As You Are 10 years later. I know it's not very creative. But in Come As You Are 3 years later, I found this piece that people were totally avoiding talking about grief and
Yeah.
asking me stuff. And so, listeners, pay attention to this. It's very important. This is the best thing. Now, listen to this and I'll explain this. This is the best thing you can do to help somebody who is grieving. Let me rephrase that. This is the best thing you can do to help somebody who has lost someone or something. Go up to them and just say these words. How's your grief? That's it. Not exploring about the person they lost, just how's your grief? This is the response I'm going to ask you, Diane, so we can show this for folks. Diane, as you think about your son or your family or your daughter, how was your grief yesterday?
Wow. If somebody had asked me that,
I'm asking you that right now. How's
yeah,
your grief?
yeah, yeah.
Answer that.
I
How's your grief? Yeah. Yesterday, how
My
was your
grief
grief?
is, and I'm going to use your words because it is evolving. I still have it. I'm still experiencing it. The loss, even today, 52 years after my mom, and it'll be 14 years after my son. And there are times in my life when the grief is still continues, like holiday times, because my mom died around Christmas. That's really hard. My son's birthday is July 21st, and he would have been 50. And it just, to me, he's always going to be 35. Lucky him. But his memory's still strong. It's there. And I know this is silly, but there are things I do. He was a big guy. He was in the military. I still have some of his shirts, and I have his suitcase that I still use, and I can't get rid of it. There's several things like that, just because they remind me of him. And that's silly because it's a disposable crappy piece of luggage, or the shirts are too big, but I don't care. I sleep in them sometimes just to make me feel like I have a connection with them. Yeah.
Great answer. So, listeners, what I want you to note in Diane's response to that question is that she didn't fall apart. She didn't end up in a ball on the floor in a fetal position, crying and sobbing.
Yep.
She talked about her grief one step back from it. She talked almost like a narrator about her grief, like this meta description of her grief. You will help people by asking this question. If you were to ask, how's your grief yesterday? I would have said, I really didn't think about Brian at all until I was in a conversation with Lou in the evening. And the day before, I didn't think about Brian at all. I was busy with trying to get ready with some physical therapy I'm doing because I had a hip replacement. That's been top of my mind. And so, what you end up doing, first of all, for the griever or the person who's lost, you help them see that grief is a dynamic process. It's not constantly there. It's not overwhelming all the time. It's sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. And that's a great service. And then the second thing you do is you give them a witness and you become part of them giving them support because they may say, you know what, this is going on. And you can say, I support you. The piece that brought this up for me was the fact that after Brian died in those 3 years, I had 2 knee replacements.
Yeah.
And more people asked about my damn knees than they did about my grief. I'd be walking along and I'd stumble a little bit, and people would say, how's your knees?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, oh, they're fine, or I'm okay, or this or that. No one ever asked about my grief. And so if you're out there and you're talking to somebody who's lost anything, just simply saying, how's your grief is so pivotal for them, so helpful for them. And so I'd encourage you to try it out. Try it out once, and you will see people are not going to fall apart. People are just going to have a clear, cogent conversation with you about how things are going. It's amazing.
You know what? I love that technique because I have a lot of widows in my life right now, and they're all struggling in some way or another. But I have to ask you because I've had this experience and I want to know what surprised you the most about how grief showed up, even after so much time and reflection. What kind of experiences did you have?
What surprised me the most was that in spite of what the world has told me and tells us, which is there's like this off switch to grief or this piece that we're supposed to be over with. What surprised me was that I had the courage to be present and allow whatever came up to come up.
Yes. Yes.
That's I guess maybe it shouldn't be surprising because I'm a person who steps up to the plate on things. But it was a pleasant affirmation that there's this wholeness to who we are. And I want the whole picture. I want the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't want to fill my life with just desserts, right? I want to have the
Exactly.
full meal because that's what a balanced life is about. And one of the one of the huge myths in our world is that if you read this book, if you do this thing, if you smoke this whatever, if you give yourself this therapy, you will somehow be happy. And everybody's chasing it all the time. We're not, some people buy cars because they think that's going to buy them happiness. Some
Hmm?
people get married because they think that's going to buy them happiness. But a lot more people spend their life reading books and looking at themselves and thinking that there's something wrong with them because they're not farting rainbows 24/7.
Yes. Yes. One of the several experiences I've had since, especially since my son died, I was visiting a friend and I had never met her son. We're out on her front porch talking. And this is probably, it was a few years ago. So it's 10 years after Jeff passed. And I'm standing there, and this big, burly, ginger man with a beard comes out. And for a brief moment, my heart stopped and I looked at my friend Beth and I started sobbing because for just a millisecond, I thought it was Jeff. Our brain plays those games with us.
Yeah.
And there are times when you just see someone and you think, "Oh my God, that's Jeff." Or and it's just really hard. And literally 10 years later, I had such a visceral response. I had to excuse myself and get in the car and drive away and sob in private because it was like he died all over again just for that brief moment. And people don't realize that.
Yeah.
And another time, which I think I walk on the beach in Myrtle Beach as much as I can. I'm very blessed. And it was in July. In fact, it was Jeff's birthday. And I like to go to the ocean because we were in the water together. And I figure that there's a connection there. In my mind, that's comforting to me. So I'm on the beach and this young man is on with a bike, one of those sand bikes. He stops me and he says, "Ma'am, would you take my picture with the beach in the back or pier in the background?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Yeah, I'm raising money for Vets That Complete Suicide."
Oh, wow.
I literally broke down and started sobbing. And here's this young man. He had lost a dear friend, a veteran, to suicide. And it was like, it's divine intervention. Jeff was just letting me know, "Hey, I'm here. I'm okay, Mom." And this young man and I shared a moment of grief together. And I've had those moments in my life so that have happened. It's much more, I think it's stronger for me with my son because my mom died at such a young age and I still had my aunts around and they looked like my mom and we had traditions and stuff. But yeah, my son he still comes back to me. But I can tell you, holiday times for me since my mom died have never been the same. They're just painful. And I don't intentionally think about it, but around from Thanksgiving on, I have this overwhelming sadness. And it's not sadness in the sense that I sob, but it's just a sense of loss. And I miss her. And I talk to her because my dad didn't let us talk about death and dying. And he got married right afterwards, remarried, and we weren't allowed to talk about my mom. So I have complicated grief and I accept that and I work through it. But like you, I feel people have to allow themselves to feel that emotion because it's like Pandora's box. If you keep stuffing stuff in, it's going to come out somehow, some way, sooner or later.
Absolutely. And Diane, I think for a lot of folks, the holidays are filled with such baloney from what we're taught because
Yes,
it's filled with baloney from people who are trying to sell us stuff.
yes, yes,
Just and if you're out there listening to this, and this may make no sense to you, but if it does, you're going to be like, oh my God, there are some people in the world who are not complete during the holidays, Thanksgiving especially, unless they have this weird green bean casserole that's made with cream of mushroom soup and topped with Funyuns or something like
yeah,
that. That's it. Somebody made that up. The pilgrims weren't eating that. Somebody made that up to sell you stuff. And now it's, oh yes, that's my fondest memory of Thanksgiving. We are like, and that's just one example of all this stuff that's labored onto us about
yes,
how the holidays have to be. And so when you're grieving and you've lost someone, and then on top of it is this baloney about how the holidays have to be, that's an extra added weight that you have to slog through. It's
yes,
and it's all put together so that you'll buy something.
yes,
And so don't buy into that.
yes,
You create your own holiday traditions, and it's not Christmas has to be this way or that. What Christmas is used to be one thing. And everyone who's listening to this podcast remembers the day when the Christmas stuff didn't come out until after Thanksgiving. And now the Christmas stuff is out in July. It's
yes,
crazy. And it's That should tell you something about the machine that is out there.
Yes.
And you mentioned, Diane, complicated grief. People on this podcast should know that's a recent diagnosis, recent diagnostic criteria created by the American Psychological Association in the last 5 years. Um,
Uh-huh.
20 years ago, there was no complicated grief. There wasn't. 15
Good
years,
point.
10 years ago, there was no complicated grief. And so it is a communication tool that people use to share things, but it's also, Diane and I were talking before this podcast started about politics. It's also a political tool because it's voted in or voted out. People get together and there's lobbyists, there's pressure, and they all get together and they vote, and suddenly there's a new diagnosis that, all right, now there's complicated grief. There was a time, and the piece that stands out for this, just recent history, in the 1970s, or in 1973 or 1974, millions of gay men and lesbians were cured overnight when the American Psychological Association voted to take same-sex attraction off their diagnostic list of mental disorders. Before that point in the 1970s, if you were a gay man or a lesbian, you fit the criteria for a psychiatric mental disorder that they could treat with medication and all kinds of other stuff. But overnight, they voted and everybody was cured. And so I think of that when I see things like complicated grief and have to think, I'm not trying to be like all, oh, there's a conspiracy here. But I had a good friend, Jordan, who would always say, when you read something, you have to ask yourself, who's making money off of this decision? Why is this coming about now? And I think about that with complicated grief. Who's making money off of this decision? Because I'm on one end saying grief is normal, and they're on the other hand saying, oh, it's complicated grief. It's something that needs to be fixed. And the core definition, listen to this, the core definition of complicated grief is that your grieving takes longer than the societal norms dictate. That's one of the diagnostic criteria, that your grieving takes longer than what society and whatever society it is thinks that it should be. And because it takes longer, you've got a mental disorder.
It's really sad because when you love deeply, the loss is profound. It's going to stay with you. I appreciate that because you're right. People feel what they feel, and they act like we're not supposed to feel that way for such a long period of time. But for my mom, I loved her. I was a teenager and I had a good relationship with my mom, and I cared for her when she was sick because my dad wasn't capable of doing the things. And I was far too young to experience what I saw and what I did to to care for her. But it's made me who I am. But you're right. She was taken away from me much too early in life. And it's a loss that I've always had. And yeah, you're right. It's complicated. Complicated grief. It's just grief. It's just the way I deal with it. My life has gone on. I've had children. I still do many things. And I continue to help others through this because it's a cruel world out here, especially when it comes to death and dying, I think, anyway.
It is.
People are insensitive, and instead of, they use the avoidance. I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to see you address your issues because I don't want to have to face that either. Because if they have to face grief, then they have to face the reality that pain comes from love. And that's really hard for people.
Yeah. It's even hard. I could hear your voice crack when you talked about that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And my voice is cracking on that piece.
yeah,
And I'm not sad. Yeah, I try to tell this to folks. This is not a bad thing. It's the
yeah,
truth. The
yeah.
pain comes from love. And We were back to this complicated grief piece, right? I just told everybody it's a baloney thing. I'm diagnosed with complicated grief because it's like, who's the benefactor of this? Who's making money? And
Yep.
so I have two dogs. They help me immeasurably through get through COVID after Brian died.
Yes.
I would be lost without these two dogs.
Yes.
And then they came up with this complicated grief. And so now I'm admitting my hypocrisy here. Like this make money type or take advantage type of world we live in. So because I'm diagnosed with complicated grief, I invested the time to train my two dogs as service animals because now I have a psychiatric diagnosis.
Yeah.
And and so even though I think the psychiatric diagnosis is baloney, I'll take it. And you can diagnose the crap out of me because that allows me now to take these dogs where I need to take them. And went through a whole series of public access training with them. I can take them both to the grocery store. They both sit down. They're both people. They can sit down in the vegetable aisle and I can walk around the store and be totally out of sight and they will still wait for me. They won't move.
Bless them.
They
God
are
bless.
well trained for public access. And as my grief has evolved, the truth is it's not as intense. It's like getting a burn on your hand. That burn is still there. The scar is still there. It's not as intense as that first burn when you put it on the
Yes.
burner. And so the dogs are serving less of a factor of treating my psychiatric diagnosis, but I still hang on to it because I get to take the dogs places.
You know what? I'm a shameless opportunist. I would do the same thing.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, give me that diagnosis. I'll take
You
it.
know what? It makes me happy. And you know what? Damn it, I deserve happiness.
Absolutely.
Scott, if someone listening today is still in the early days of grief and can't imagine loving or even living fully again, what would you say to them?
How you're feeling is normal. Don't
Thank you.
let anybody tell you that how you're feeling is wrong or tell you that this needs to change by Tuesday or this will change by Thursday or tell you if you do this or you do this journal activity or you write this stuff that somehow it's going to change. Grief is absolutely normal. It is
Yes,
it is the price we pay
for love.
for love.
Yeah, yeah,
Period. Period.
yes.
And so if you are feeling grief today, we really should say to people who are grieving, we should go up to them and say, congratulations. We should go up to them and say, I'm jealous of you because you made choices that let you feel so deeply
Yes,
that
yes,
you are now experiencing the flip side of the coin. That
yes,
is absolutely amazing.
yes.
Absolutely amazing. It's something to be proud about. It's something to be celebrated and not something to be medicated, swept under the carpet, or pushed through some artificial process.
Exactly. Scott, I am so grateful that you took the time today, and I hope you'll join me again on
I will. I'd love
other
to.
subjects because it is raw and it's reality, and we as a society need to change because we all are going to be in that situation where we lose someone or something, whether it's our animals even, and it's a process that people say, oh, it's just a dog. No, no, not to me. I love that creature. You know, and it's
Absolutely.
when you love unconditionally that you have the deepest feelings for it of loss. And that to love and lose is to live. To my family caregivers out there, I want to remind you that you are the most important part of the caregiving journey. Without you, it all falls apart. So please learn to be gentle with yourself. Practice self care every day because you are worth it.